Hey, welcome back. My name is Ari. I'm a product designer and developer based in Sydney, Australia. And in this video, we're going to go through the basics of HTML. Last week, we put together this login and registration form in Figma, and that's the project that we're going to try to bring to life with actual code. Before we get started, just bear in mind that we're not really going to cover what HTML is or how a website is put together, as I've done a video on that previously, and I'll link that down below. So check that out if you haven't already, or if you don't really know what HTML is, as we're just going to dive right into things in this video. We're also not going to put together the CSS part, we're just going to put together the HTML elements of things for this video, and in the next video we're going to cover the CSS, as if I was to put both of them together in one video, it would have been a very long ass video. And I just really want to concentrate on the basics of HTML and get you guys familiarized with that. As always, I've timestamped this video, so jump to the section that is most relevant to you if you need to, or sit back, relax and watch the whole thing. And I've linked down to all the important links right down below, including the code to this tutorial if you need it, and also a link to the Figma file. The first thing that we're going to need today is this Figma Design. Today we're not really going to put together the CSS of this, we're only going to look at the HTML, and in the next video I'm going to do the CSS for this. For the tools that we're going to need Visual Studio Code, download it for your device. Within Visual Studio Code, whenever you have it, open it up, go to this tab, which are your extensions. The theme that I'm using is Monokai Pro. If you want the same theme, otherwise you could stick with whatever that you like or the default that comes with this editor. The second plugin is Prettier, which is this one over here. This is a code formatter that helps you format your code on save. You have to set it up for HTML. I will leave a link to that down below as well, to an article on how to do that. And the very last extension that you're going to need is a live server. Right over here, just make sure that that's installed as well. If something is installed, you're not going to see the install button. Depending on what version of Visual Studio Code that you get, sometimes Live Server does come out of a box with Visual Studio Code. Once you get the two extensions, all we have to do at this point is to create a folder structure. So choose a space on your computer. For me, I am choosing to create my folder structure on Documents. I'm going to right click over here for a new folder. I'm going to name this YouTube example registration, and I'm going to drag and drop this right into my Visual Studio Code, and I'm ready to go. Now that we have our Visual Studio Code set up, we're gonna set up a project structure. Now every project is different depending on how large your project is, what technology you're using, so on and so forth. However, for this one, we're going to keep it simple. First, let's look at the design again. We know that we're going to code two different pages, the sign up page and the sign in page. Let's go ahead and create two HTML files over here. One of them called sign-up.html, and the other one, let's go ahead and create another file. Another way we can create files is to click on the new file icon up here, and let's call this one sign-in.html. Now we have two .html files in our folder that we created. I also want to organize my project by placing all of my HTML files in one location, placing all of my CSS files in another location, and all of my assets, things like images and fonts, in a different folder. And this way we can make sure that our files are organized. So let's go ahead and create a folder. Let's call this one Styles. This is where all of my CSS files will live. We will come back to this in the next video that will come out after this. Then I'm going to create another folder over here, and I'm going to call this one Assets. And this is where we're going to place all of our images, fonts, or anything else like that. And that's it for the file structure. Cool. Next, I want to talk about HTML boilerplate. Boilerplate basically just means a starting file, a HTML starting file. What's really cool about VS Code is that it gives us access to this thing called Emmet. Emmet allows us to code faster by auto-completing our code, and I'll give you an example of that. In HTML, we have a whole bunch of common tags, one of them being, for example, a div. So you can see that as soon as I type in a div, I get one thing over here, which is an Emmet abbreviation. If I was to click on this, it basically completes the entire tag for me. I could also do this by simply just typing div and pressing enter. It does the same thing, and then I could do this by typing div and pressing tab, and that does the same thing as well. And that's how Emmet works. We could actually use Emmet to do our entire boilerplate. So all I have to do to create an HTML boilerplate, type a bang over here and press tab, and you could see that it creates this entire boilerplate for me. Now this can look a little bit intimidating, but it's not. So let's go ahead and describe what this does exactly. Every HTML file starts with a doctype. The doctype declaration basically tells the browser what type of document to expect. I'm going to type doctype and it actually auto-completes it for me, and HTML. Basically, this tells the browser to expect a HTML file. Just bear in mind that the doctype is not a HTML tag. The next tag that I want you guys to get familiarized with is the HTML tag. I'm going to type HTML and press tab. The HTML tag basically represents the root of my HTML document. Everything that I type from now and onwards will sit between these two tags over here. The next two tags that we're going to learn about are the head and a body tag. So let's go ahead and type them in. So head, great, and body, great. Also notice how when I save my document, everything gets reorganized. That's that prettier extension that we installed at the beginning of this tutorial. All right, let's go through the head tag first. The head tag basically holds the metadata of our document. Metadata basically just means data about data. And most of the metadata is usually not really displayed on the page itself. But they do help us to achieve quite a few different things. They help us to create specific standards that we communicate with the browser. They help us to bring in our CSS or JavaScript files. They help us to do a whole bunch of other stuff as well. Let's go through an example of those things. Every HTML page has a title tag that sits within the head tag. And the title tag is the title of our page. I'm going to call this page Sign Up, and I'm going to save it by pressing Command S or Control S on Windows. And now we're going to use the second extension that we installed, which was the live server. I'm going to right click anywhere on my screen and click on Open with Live Server. And that's going to open up this link for me. This 127.0.0.1 is basically your local host, your local machine. It's just the fake server that's running on your machine right now. The 5500 is the port that we're running this on. And this is the HTML page that we created, which is signup.html. I want you to take a look at the title up here, which says sign up. You can see that that is directly related to the sign up that we created over here. So if I was to change this to sign up page, and save this and go back over here, you can see that it's automatically updated to sign up page. I'm going to close this tab because we no longer need it. Now I'm going to introduce a couple of other tags to you guys. Let's talk about the body tag. The body tag basically defines the body of the document. This is everything that you would see on the page. If I was to go ahead and type something over here and save it and go back to my browser, you can see that something comes up because I've placed this within the body of my document. There are quite a few different tags that we can use in order to build our pages, and we're going to go through a few of them in this tutorial. Now that we have the basics out of the way, let's go ahead and delete everything from here and create a boilerplate by pressing bang and pressing tab on our keyboard. And we get this, we get what you guys saw at the beginning. Let's talk about everything that appears within the head. So as we talked about, the head holds the meta information. Now these are different meta tags and there are many of them. The three that come out of a box within my HTML boilerplate are the character set. This defines the character encoding of my HTML document. The next one is the HTTP equiv, and this defines the HTTP header for information and value for the content attribute. Then we have the meta name viewport, and this gives browsers instructions on how to deal with responsiveness and scaling. Title we have seen before. I'm just going to change this to sign up. Great, now that we have all that out of the way, let's go and actually build our design. One way to think about designs is boxes, and that's how HTML really is. It's just boxes inside of boxes. So if you look at this design, we've got this massive box, which is the outer sign up frame that I've selected over here. Then if I was to turn on my grids, then we have this box over here, which is our container. You could think of it as a container. Nothing grows outside of this grid over here. Then you could think of each of these sections as boxes as well. So we have a box that withholds my logo. Then we have a box that holds this area. We have another box box that holds this area. And if I was to even get rid of these boxes, then we have another box that holds all of these guys in. And you could think of these sections as boxes and these sections as boxes as well. How you divide your designs is up to you. There are multiple approaches to develop the same design in HTML. For us, I'm going to think of this as one section, this entire page, because I want to be able to control the background color. So I'm going to go back to my VS Code. I'm going to create a tag called section. A section tag basically defines a section of a document. It's quite simple. I'm going to press enter and I'm going to save this. We're going to go back to our browser and you can see that nothing really appears over here. And that's because I don't really have anything inside my section. But if I was to go back to my document and type something here and save it, you can see that something appears. Go ahead and right click on your browser and click on inspect. This is our developer tool and it replicates everything that we just coded in the previous page. There are some stuff that we don't have in our code, but that's just because of the live server. So you could ignore those. Basically, you can have a look at the head. You can see that everything that we coded appears over here as well. And if I was to close this, if I was to open the body, again, ignore this because that's code that's injected by live server. You can see that we have a section, which is right over here, and we have something inside of it, exactly how we coded it. I also want you guys to notice one thing. When I hover over a section, the actual section on the page gets highlighted. And you can see that the highlight takes over the entire page. That's because our section is displayed as a block element. In HTML, at a very high level, there are two ways we can display elements: block and inline. Block means that once you create a HTML tag that's a block, it takes as much space that's available to it. So in our case over here, it's the entire area of the browser. And I'm going to show you guys an inline element quickly. If I was to create an anchor tag represents a link. And you could potentially just type a link over here. For example, https google.com. And I'm just going to type Google here and save it and go back to our browser. You can see that we got Google over here. So again, look at the highlighted area. Sections highlights the entire page. But when I go to Google, you can see that it only highlights the word Google. And that's because elements that are inline elements only take as much space as they need, which means that if I go back to my code and if I was to duplicate this, so create another section underneath this and save it, this section now would get dropped underneath the other one, as you can see. So we got something, and each of these are block elements that take over the entire area. However, if I was to go ahead and copy my anchor tag, and if I did it even 4 times and save this and go back over here, you could see that they don't get stacked like my block elements. They get placed right next to each other like this. One more thing before I move on from here, notice that on my anchor tag, we have this blue text over here. These are called attributes. Every HTML tag can take in some attributes to allow it to do different things. So for example, my anchor tag takes on an attribute of href, and href is a link. Because of the fact that we said this goes to google.com, if I go back over here and click on this, it will in fact takes us to google.com. Now that we have that out of the way, let's go back, let's create a section. Tab, save it. We have our section. This is going to be representing this entire area. Then inside of that, I want a container. So I want to create this barrier. So I'm going to, inside my section, create a div. Let's talk about what a div is. A div defines a division or a section of a HTML document. I personally usually only use divs when I need to create a group out of a bunch of different HTML elements, or if I wanted to style a specific thing, or if I wasn't really too sure what other tags to use for that specific section. Otherwise, if you go to a website like W3 Schools for reference, there are a whole bunch of HTML tags that you could pick and choose from here that could be more useful than a div, and it'll make your file easier to read. Things like the section tag, or if I have a navigation area, things like the nav tag, so on and so forth. There are many tags over here, and I do encourage you guys to have a look at this and really think about what tags you use and when you use it. All right, let's go back to our Figma file. Now that we have this outer element and our grid area sorted, let's start coding the logo up here. I'm going to create a box like this as a container for our logo. And then I'm going to bring our logo in as an image as well. In order to do that, I have already exported all of these images out for you. So again, link to that down below. Make sure you download it and drop it into your assets folder. And I've done that for myself. It's called website images, and here's the logo. I'm going to grab all of these, copy them, and paste them right into my assets folder. And now I have access to them within my VS Code. So if I open up assets, you can see that they all are here now. So let's go ahead and create an area for my logo. Going through the list that I just provided over here, we have this tag called a header, which defines the header of a document. And you could dig further down into it to see a bunch of rules around it as well, right? Let's go back to my HTML doc and create a header. That's where I'm going to encapsulate the logo. And inside of that, we're going to use this other tag called image. Notice how some tags like image is different to my typical tags, because typically tags have an opening and a closing tag, and then they sandwich some content inside of them. There are some tags like the image or the meta tag that don't necessarily have any closing tags. My image tag comes with two different attributes that you should always provide. The source attribute is the source to the image. So this is basically where your image is in relation to your current document. So right now I am in sign up. My image is inside the assets folder and I want this logo.svg. We're going to bring that in a second. And we have an alt attribute. The alt attribute specifies the alternative text in case we cannot load the image. It's also really good for screen loaders, and in some cases it's good for SEO as well. So I'm going to call this logo, and I'm going to save it before actually placing my image in here, just to show you guys what happens if we can't really load an image. If I go back to my sign up page, you can see that the image is trying to load, but it cannot find the image at the moment because, well, there is no link to an image. But we have this text that's called logo. So just in case we can't really load an image, at the very least, we could show to the end user that this is where the logo is meant to be. And that's why you always want to provide an alt tag for all of your images. Now, how do we go from the source to the assets folder? In HTML, if I just type in period and / period / basically means look within the same folder as I'm in right now. So for example, I'm in the folder of YouTube-example-registration, and I want to get inside of the assets folder. So once I type in / you could see that my code editor is already pointing to everything that I have access to, right? So I could click on the assets folder, and then I could click on logo.svg, or you could just type this out and it would work exactly the same. And I'm going to save this and I'm going to go back here, and you can see that all of a sudden I have my logo up here just like that. And we are going to look at it down here as well, because we do have it under this section inside the div and then inside the header tags. And that's where the header of a document lives right now. All right, let's go back to the design and find out what we're going to do next. All right, we're going to do this section over here now, which is our form section. What I'll do, because from here onwards, we're going to use a whole bunch of the same tags. I'm going to start creating HTML comments just so that we could identify what these tags are. So in order to create a comment in HTML, you basically type in less than, bang, hyphen, 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 greater than to close your comments, right? And anything that I type in here is now a comment. So if I save this and go back to my page, this doesn't appear anywhere except for inside my code, but it doesn't really appear anywhere on the page. And this is a great way to leave comments for your code in order to organize it or in order to communicate different things with other developers if they're also working on it. So what I'll do, I'm going to type in less than, greater than, and it auto completes it for me. And I'm going to call this the main section. Another way that you could do comments, which is a faster way, is as a shortcut. And on a Mac, it's command and /, and it actually creates a comment for you. And this is going to be my container. This is going to be my header. We already know that. And down here is going to be my form section. And my form section has this top area, which I'm going to call top info. Then we got this breaker line, which HTML actually out of the box comes with a break line. And we have the forms, we have the button, and then we have this small copy down here. So let's go ahead and start with the top section over here. This is our top info section. First, let's create a div for our entire form. Then let's call this one top info section. I'm going to create a div for this blue box, And then I'm going to create all of these elements within that div and group them all together. So let's create a div, press enter. And inside of here, I'm going to create a header 6, a header 1, and a paragraph. And let's explain what each of these are. So these h1 through to h6, so there are h1, h2, h3, h4, h5, and h6. h1 defines the highest level or the most important heading within the HTML document. It's good practice to keep it to just one heading 1 for one entire document or per document page. And heading 6 is the least important part of the document. And they are also represented with sizes as well. So if I type heading 6 and heading 1, and actually I will type paragraph, the P defines the area where your body text will go. That's just any paragraph or any text that you might have within your body will just live right over here. So I'm going to save this and show you guys what this currently looks like. So you can see that we've got a heading 6, we've got a heading 1, which is bigger than our heading 6, and then we've got a paragraph. And by default, the styles that we're getting out of a browser makes these two bold and makes our paragraph font weight regular. Let's go back over here and I'm just going to grab all of my text straight from here. So sign up is the first text. I'm just copying it and pasting it, by the way. I'm going to do the same thing with create account. Great. And I'm going to do the same thing with this. Perfect. Now we have the top section of our form. Then we're going to need this break line over here. I don't know if you guys can see it, but it's right over here. And we're going to introduce a new tag over here, which doesn't have a closing tag, which is just called HR. HR is a horizontal rule. It's literally just a line that appears on your page, exactly like this. And it's really good when you want to create a separation between two sections. Next, we have our form area. This is where we're going to introduce a new tag called form. Out of a box comes with this action, but I don't really need it for this. So I'm going to delete it. And a form basically acts just like a div does as well. So if I go within here, inside of here, we have our header at the top. Then we have our div at the bottom. And you can see that we've got another div and we've got all of our items in here. We've got our HR element and we've got our form element. There you go. I'm just going to type in hello so you can see it. Now, inside that form element, you can see that we've grouped these two guys together. When I selected, this is a group, and this is its own group. And we also have this paragraph section down here. So let's just go ahead and quickly create one div that's going to group these two guys together. And then inside of that, create two more divs for these guys. That's how I'm going to group those. Another div, a button, and lastly, a paragraph. So let's go ahead and quickly do that. Actually, as a matter of fact, let's create main form tag over here. And let's go ahead with a div that's going to house my first two form inputs. I'm going to create another div. I'm going to copy this and paste it down here and save that. And that represents these two divs at the top. And then we've got two more divs going down, right, outside of this div. So because I don't want to group those together. So we've got a div over here, a div over here. Then we have a button. So a button tag is a button. And then we have another paragraph tag that we're going to fill very soon. And let's just create a gap just so that it's more readable. All right, let's get the easier stuff out of the way at first. So our button, when I save it right now, you're going to see an empty button over here. I don't know if you can see it, but it's just right over there on the page. Currently on the design, it says create account. So let's quickly just type create account and save it. And you can see that now we have a button that says create account. Again, go back to the design and we have this section that says I have read and agreed to terms of service. So you can see that the terms of service is a link. And remember we talked about the anchor tags, and the anchor tag can be a link. So we're gonna wrap that inside an anchor tag. So let's go ahead inside my design, inside the paragraph, and just type in I have read and agreed to the terms of service. Great. Over here, so I'm going to create our anchor tag again. So an anchor tag, it's just this with an attribute of href, and then you just close it and make sure that my closing tag wraps my terms of service text. And I don't have a link yet, so I'm going to leave a pound for an empty anchor tag. So you can see that I have read and agreed to the terms of service appears over here now. Now let's go and do the more complicated part, which are our labels, our form labels, and our inputs. And we're going to get introduced to a few extra concepts over here as well. Each of these guys are wrapped inside a div to group a label and a form input. And inside HTML, a label is represented as a label. And then you have this for attribute. I'm going to leave that empty and come back to it in a second. The first label is going to be first name, and I'm going to save that. And we have an input underneath it. There are many types of different input in HTML, things like text, password, number, email, and a few more. And you can see that they're represented over here. But for this specific one, I'm going to use a typical text input, and I'm going to provide an ID, an identification for this specific input. An ID in HTML is used to specify a specific element. And I could only have one ID per HTML document. So for example, if I go ahead and use the ID of hello over here, I can no longer use another ID of hello on the same page. I'm not going to call this one hello. I'm going to call this one first-name, save it, go back to my HTML doc just so that we could see what we got. So we got first name and we have our form input. And you saw this for attribute on my label up here as well. The idea with this is that this label belongs specifically to this input box. And a way to ensure that the browser knows what this label belongs to, we grab the name of the ID that we provided for our input, copy it, and paste it inside the for, and save it. So it's for first name, and we know that the ID of this input is first name. And this also enables another feature on the browser as well. So if I go over here, and now if I click on the label and not just the input, if I click on the label, you can see that it knows which input to select and which input this label belongs to. So I'm going to create a space between these two guys, and I'm going to clean up my code a little bit again. So we've got a form, we've got inline form, we've got our first name, we've got our last name that we're going to create. So again, I'm going to do the same thing. As a matter of fact, we could just copy this up here, paste it down here, change this to last name, and I just need to change this to last name. Select every character in the word first, and on your keyboard, hold down Command or Control and press D, and that selects the next group of the selected characters automatically for you. So I could change this one to last name and save it, and go back to my browser, and you can see that we now have first name and last name, and you can see that they work perfectly. So once we got this, the rest of the forms are really similar as well. The only difference is that we're going to build them outside of our inline form tag. So we have our email address and password. So I'm going to copy these two lines again, go to my next set of div tags, open those guys up. I'm going to change this one to email address. I'm going to select these guys, hold down Command D to select both of these last names and change them to email. Save that, and I'm going to change the type of this input to an email input as well. And what this does, it basically allows my browser to know that, hey, this is going to be an email field, and if someone tries to submit a pattern of text that is not equivalent to an email pattern, then don't allow them to continue to the next step. That's not really useful over here. That's more useful when you're actually submitting this form in the real world, but it's good to know anyway. The next div is going to hold my password. So I'm going to paste my code down here, change this to password, and I'm going to select the last name, Command D, change this to password. And I'm also going to change the type of this input to password. And what that does, it basically tells the browser that, hey, this is a password field. If I go ahead and start typing in it, you can see that it gets masked automatically by the dots. Great, we're actually almost there. So if I go back to my design, so we've got this section, we got this section, we got this section, we got our button, we have this section. So we technically have our entire form together. That's our form completed right over here. The next section that we're going to work on is going to be underneath the form, and that's just going to be account selection section, which is this guy down here. What I might do over here, I might chuck this guy inside another div, so another container of its own, and then place a paragraph text inside of that and wrap this guy around anchor tags. So let's go back. Let's go ahead and create a div. Let's create a paragraph, which my paragraph is going to say, already have an account, question mark. And then I'm going to use my anchor tags, give it a pound for now, for the moment, and just type in sign in. Save it, go back to my design. You can see that that appears over here. It's sign in. And the very last part of my design is this guy over here. But as I said, we're gonna change this design up a little bit. So this is probably just gonna be placed further down the page like this, just to make the design a little bit more beginner friendly. Maybe in a later video, I'll show you guys how to overlap it with the actual form. Going back to here, my image, we know exactly what to use as an image tag now. It's just img, and within my source. So again, I'm going to look within the same folder, look for the assets folder, and then look for the signup.png image. And for my alt, I'm just going to type in sign up, save it, go back, and you should be able to see this guy over here as well. That's basically the end of the HTML structure for the sign up page. The rest of the design will happen within CSS, which is going to be the next tutorial. But one thing that I could do right now is, actually I could do two things right now. First of all, this already have an account piece. We want this to get linked to a different page within my document. Linking to different parts of a document is actually quite easy. So I'm going to delete the pound sign, and I'm going to do the same thing as I usually do when I look for a source. So just type in // and look for the sign-in.html page. And that basically is now telling my page to go to the sign-in.html page. So when I go ahead and sign this, have a look at up here. At the moment I got sign-up.html, but once I click on sign in, you can see that I am now inside sign-in.html file, but there's nothing inside my sign-in.html. However, if I go back to my design, you can see that the sign-in and the sign-up pages are actually quite similar together. The only difference is, well, obviously the text and the number of fields that I have available to me. It's quite an easy task to duplicate everything that I got over here. I'm gonna press Command A to select everything, Command C to copy everything, go to my sign-in.html, and Command V to paste everything. I'm gonna change this to sign in for a moment. Go back to my page. You can see that that's now my sign-in page. And I'm just going to change a whole bunch of text over here as we just said, right? So let's look at the design. We've got sign in, welcome back. So let's go ahead and copy sign in. Sign in. Instead of create an account, we're going to say welcome back. Actually, it's with a lowercase b and exclamation mark. I'm going to copy that bit and just paste it over here. Great. Save it. Go a little bit further down to my form. We no longer need the first and last name, so we could completely get rid of this first and last name part over here. We no longer need the inline form section. And let's just clean the form up a little bit. Save it. Go back and see what we're looking like. Yep, we've got the email address and password. Our CTA now says sign in. So go back to my CTA, and instead of that, just say sign in. Down here, I'm going to get rid of this bit, and I'm going to change this to forgot your password, but it is still going to be an anchor tag, and that's just going to say forgot your password. And a little bit further down, we now want this to go to the sign up page instead of a sign in page. I believe it says don't have an account yet. Yes, it says don't have an account yet. I'm going to delete this, don't have an account yet. And instead of sign in, we're just going to say create one. And last but not least, the name of our other illustration is sign-in.png. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to change the alt text to sign in, save it. And just like that, we now have the correct image over here. If I click on create one, it's going to take me to the sign up page. If I click on the sign in page, it's going to take me to the sign in page. And that's basically it. That gets us one step closer to the final design. In the next video that I'm going to link right down below the like button, we're going to go through the CSS part of this thing and start styling it to make it look exactly like our design over here. And I'll see you guys there. All right, that's it for this video. If you have any questions, just leave a comment down below and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. Also, if you could go ahead and like this video for the algorithm, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with others, all of that would really help me out greatly, and I'll see you guys in the next one.